Today, I am going to be talking about renunciation. And there are different levels of renunciation that I'm going to talk about. There is the renunciation at the foundation level and renunciation at the Mahayana level. I don't know if I'll get to it, but when you get to the Vajrayana level, there's a slightly different description of renunciation. Whichever level of renunciation that we're talking about, the basis of or the foundation of renunciation is letting go of our strong attachment to samsara, letting go of wanting to have more of the pleasures of samsara, to kind of get a better deal in our present life, and so forth. So the very standard foundation is to contemplate the four thoughts that turn one's mind to the Dharma. And I'm going to talk about these in greater depths at a future teaching, but I want to go over them briefly here. The first thought is contemplating precious human birth. We have had a birth in a human body this time around, and we could have been born in one of the five other realms. And it is in the human realm that it is easiest by far to come in contact with the Dharma, practice, and attain enlightenment. So specifically about the human realm, the advantages that we have is, first of all, our minds and our bodies are working fairly well. They could be better. We're getting older, but they still work. We can still study the Dharma, we can listen, we can contemplate, and we can meditate. And we just did medicine Buddha. So our minds and our bodies are functioning well enough to practice. We've met authentic teachers. We have an interest in the Dharma. And there are a lot of other points that I'm not going to go into at this point. The bottom line is, this is the way I like to describe it. There's been a lot of talk the past 2 decades about the 1%ers and how privileged they are. And in terms of Dharma, we're not 1%ers. We're not even 1/10 of 1%ers. We might not even be 100th of 1%ers. When you think of all the human beings in the world, their situation, both in terms of access to Dharma, living in poverty, living in countries where there is no access to the Dharma, where you might actually be put in prison if you're practicing the Dharma. We really are very, very fortunate. And it's good to consider this, how fortunate we are. It's easy to think, my situation isn't good enough. I need a better situation. But we really are very, very fortunate. And it's important that we don't squander this rare opportunity, because it's not guaranteed that after we die, we will come back and be able to continue where we are now. And that brings up the second thought, which is impermanence. We have to be aware of the fact that we could die at any moment. We take out insurance, we take out life insurance, we take out health insurance, we take out property insurance, and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is, property insurance and auto insurance might get you a new car, but life insurance doesn't get you a new life. You really never know when you will die. I was actually reading online about a study that was done, I think it was over 10 years ago, and it was done by the federal government, and it was about lifespan, declining lifespan. The United States, the lifespan has declined dramatically since COVID, but it started before that. And when you compare the United States with other economically advanced countries, the United States is lagging way behind. And this study brought up auto accidents. The United States, people put on more miles on their car than in most other countries. And as a result, people in the United States are more likely to die in an auto accident at a young age. Another one was gun violence, that there's so much gun violence in this country. And it just went down the list of things happening in this country that cause death that we have no control over. I don't know if any of you know Anitra. I'm trying to think of her last name. She grew up in Oklahoma. She used to work at KTD. 2012, her brother was shopping in a Home Depot in, I think, Oklahoma City or Tulsa. And there was a gang fight outside, and he was shot in the heart by a stray bullet and died instantly. He was, I think, buying a birthday present for either his wife or a child. This is the way life is. You've heard this before, but what brought me to Buddhism was when my best friend was killed in an accident in Menominee, being run over by a county road grader that was fitted for snow plowing. And on and on and on. We just don't know. We think that we are going to live to an old age, or we don't even think about it at all. If you really contemplate this and realize that at the time of death, you're going to leave all your worldly activities behind, all your accomplishments behind, all your family, all your possessions. The question is, what's important? You will take with you all the karma that you have accumulated trying to accomplish things in samsara, accumulate property, and so on and so forth. You also will accumulate all the positive karma that you create when you practice the Dharma. So that is the third thought, to understand how karma works and how when we engage in virtuous activities, we are accumulating karma that will lead to positive circumstances in the future. And when we accumulate negative karma through non-virtuous actions, we will be accumulating the causes for more suffering in the future. And this helps us have some perspective on what is really important in our lives, where we should really spend our time and our resources. The fourth is the unsatisfactory state of samsara. Basically, what this means is that there's no end to samsara. We've had an endless series of previous lifetimes and have gone through an endless series of one suffering after another. And even if in this lifetime you manage to be in a position where you are well off, where you feel that you are, shall we say, safe, at least for a little while, suffering still follows you like a shadow. It really never ceases. This is what is called all-pervasive suffering, because underneath it all, you really don't have control and you don't know. You might not admit this, but underneath it all, there is this uncertainty that you know about, and you are concerned about this, even though you might be in denial. So hearing these thoughts, contemplating them, perhaps reading more about them. One of Trangu Rinpoche's books just addresses these four thoughts. The whole book is about these four thoughts. And it's very good to go in great depth to these so that you have a better grasp of the situation that we are in. Now, the point of all this is that we need to take responsibility. This is not meant to make us feel bad, depressed, and so forth. It is meant to help us take responsibility, to get over the idea of the problems in our lives. It's not my fault. There's nothing that I can do about it. This is a form of laziness. And so I'm going to read a short poem that kind of demonstrates this working with, is it my fault or is the universe against me sort of mentality. And I'm kind of keeping this general, but this poem is called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. You wouldn't want me to read the long autobiography. So chapter 1, I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it is there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4, I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5, I walk down another street. The point being that if we can work with our habitual patterns, if we can take responsibility, we can practice and we can change and weaken habits. One of the things that sitting meditation does, it weakens habits. When you find that your mind goes off and gets distracted, you bring it back to the breath. It weakens a habit of getting distracted. It's amazing how it's usually the subconscious gossip that gets us distracted is usually like a soap opera, and it's usually reruns of the same soap opera. So by coming back to the breath, this helps us weaken these habitual patterns, and we begin to at least walk around the hole. Another approach that doesn't work very well, I like to call it, there's probably a good Buddhist name for it, but it is, if I just change the channel, there won't be a problem. If I change my job, change my house, buy a cabin up in the North Woods, get a new partner, or whatever, somehow or another, things are going to change. And of course, because of habitual patterns, that doesn't work either. So this gets back to renunciation. And I'm going to define renunciation as a formal rejection of something. And this is different than a New Year's resolution, which is quite superficial. And as you know, 2 weeks later, you've forgotten about that New Year's resolution. Renunciation is making a commitment to change, to taking responsibility, and then making this commitment to change, to go in a different direction, even if it's little by little by little. There's kind of a comparison between the hare and the tortoise. And the hare, this is a Greek fable. The hare, of course, runs really quickly and is distracted, and then it's got to rest. Meanwhile, the tortoise keeps slowly plodding, and the tortoise gets to the goal quickest. And so renunciation doesn't mean that you suddenly just drop everything and start practicing the Dharma. It means that you do it slowly, deliberately, and with a steadiness about it, as opposed to, well, I'm going to do a retreat sometime, and then I'll practice, and then you go back to your regular life. Now, it's fine to do this, but if you realize that you have to, in between the retreats, also integrate the Dharma into your life, that is the difference between the hare and the tortoise. You don't completely let up in between. On the Hinayana level, renunciation basically means compassion turned inwards, that we're renouncing the causes of suffering, the afflictive states of mind. In fact, the fruition of the foundation level or the Hinayana level is an arhat, and the Tibetan word means foe destroyer. An arhat has destroyed the afflictive states of mind: passion, aggression, indifference, pride, and jealousy. The arhat has completely eliminated these afflictive states of mind. So that is the fruition of renunciation at the Hinayana level. On the Hinayana level, it tends to be more avoiding the causes, external causes of these afflictive states of mind. So stay away from people and situations that make you mad. It's realizing that the foe, the afflictive state of mind, is stronger than you are, your ability to resist giving into it. And so on the Hinayana level, it is just staying out and staying away from people that are going to cause you to get angry. Stay away from the websites that picture all kinds of women, if you're a man or if you're attracted to women, and this sort of thing. On my Facebook, I'm continually, or same thing with YouTube, given ads on the side panels about Ukrainian women that want to meet me. For instance, well, I don't go there, but this is what I'm talking about. There is just so much out there in the world that is intended to appeal to your afflictive states of mind. And this type of renunciation is external discipline and just plain avoiding these situations. So we are renouncing these afflictive states of mind. We want to remove them, and we want to replace them with more caring attitudes. Now, with renunciation, it requires courage, because part of this is we're renouncing what is familiar. We're very familiar with the afflictive states of mind. We're very familiar with samsara. It might end up with a lot of suffering, but we are very familiar with samsara. So we need to take courage and renounce the security of being in a familiar place. In this case, the bottom of that hole. Or walking down a familiar street. It might be walking down a new street. It requires courage to overcome the fear of the unexplored. There's a lot of opportunity in the world. And if we don't explore it, we don't see the opportunity. Speaking from my own experience, when I entered the 3-year retreat, I had to close up my business, which was an upholstery business. I knew when I got out of retreat, I would not reopen the upholstery business. I knew when the retreat ended, I would not have a job. I didn't know what my job would be when I got out of retreat. Before the retreat started, I didn't ask Rinpoche. Maybe this was a little arrogant. I said, Rinpoche, I'd like to be a lama. And his answer was, we'll see. So I really had no idea. I didn't even know I was going to become a monk. Then I got out. I had no money. I had spent it all. It was amazing that even the money came for me to do a 3-year retreat. Some of it was donated. I saved up some money. 2 men showed up one day and said, we hear you have a lot of antique tractors. Would you sell them? And I sold them to these guys. That paid for a quarter of my retreat. By the time I paid for the retreat, I had nothing. I was getting a little income from rental of the house. And so I got out of retreat, and a friend of mine said, well, this other friend of ours is looking for construction workers. So I called him up and I'd like to work for him. And he said, well, bring your tool belt tomorrow and show up at this work site. And that's how I got that job. The point being, it takes courage to go off in new directions, whether it be a new job or practicing the Dharma and so forth. It's not for the faint of heart to really be a good Dharma practitioner. And the biographies of the great Kagyu masters are intended for purposes of inspiration as well as teaching. So it's good to have some inspiration about what you're renouncing and where you want to go with your practice. Now, the Mahayana approach is to work with our self-cherishing, to equalize self and others. So the Mahayana motivation is to benefit all sentient beings. The foundation level, it is to reduce one's own suffering. The Mahayana renunciation builds on the external renunciation of the foundation level, that we renounce harming others, our ego, kleshas. In the foundation level with the Mahayana, we bring in the idea of emptiness, the idea of things are not as solid as we think they are, this idea of seeing ourselves and others as equal, and also in a way ordinary, but in another way, our Buddha nature is equal. Ours is equal to a Buddha. Another being's is equal to a Buddha. Even a person that behaves very roughly and harms all kinds of people has Buddha nature just as much as you have. And on the Mahayana level, interdependence comes in, which is closely related to emptiness. And we try to expand this caring for others to go from just caring for a few beings to going in the direction of caring for all beings. Now, this is a goal. And the Karmapa has said recently that it's extremely difficult to care for all beings equally. But this is the goal. This is the direction that we're going in with the Mahayana. Now, some obstacles to this have to do with ignorance. And one obstacle is thinking that I don't need assistance. I can do this on my own through reading books and nowadays getting on the internet, watching videos on YouTube and so forth. And there's a lot on YouTube, and there's more books than you could read in a lifetime out there. The purpose of the Lama, Rinpoche told me this one time. Actually, it was Chujor, Rinpoche's translator. I don't know if any of you remember Chujor, but he was Rinpoche's translator when I first met Rinpoche back in 1987. And he was Tibetan, but he once told me in private, it's the purpose of the Lama to push the student further than they would push themselves. Hence my motivational speaker cap that you can visualize, because we need assistance if we are really going to progress on the path. Other obstacles are the three types of laziness. I liked this when I came in contact with this because I could see myself in all three types of laziness. The first is what I call couch potato. I don't know what the Tibetan word is. You just lie around in bed all day long, and then at night you might get to bed early, or you might have trouble sleeping because you've been sleeping all day long. But then when you do get up after an hour, pretty soon you need to take a nap. I'm not talking about people that have illness that causes this. I'm talking about people that this is their psychological habitual pattern. And the way I related to this was when I first came to Buddhism, I had been sleeping up to 16 hours a day, and there was nothing physically wrong with me. I was an expert at sleeping 16 hours a day, and the other 8, I was tired. So that is one form of laziness. You wake up in the morning and you start thinking, oh, I have all these things to do today. How can I possibly do them? It's just overwhelming. I think I better go back to sleep so I can save up my energy and be able to do this later on. And of course, later on might not come. Meanwhile, the dirty dishes stack up in the kitchen sink, and the trash stacks up in various places in the house, and on and on and on. So the second type of laziness is mindless busyness. And that involves just keeping busy, doing all kinds of activities. And the end result is that you don't have time to do what's important because you spend all your time doing things that aren't so important. The third type is, I could say self-deprecation. I think that's a good word for it, which is, oh, I could never do that, so I'm not going to try. Why waste my time? And all three of these are saturated with procrastination. And they are all, I guess, saturated with lack of courage. Rinpoche gave me, one of my refuge names was diligence. And what I realized was that the antidote for laziness is diligence, joyful exertion, not just once, not just twice, but over and over and over again. So part of renunciation is this diligence, this joyful exertion in the Dharma. Now, in Mahamudra, we did the Mahamudra lineage supplication. So I am going to read a little bit of what Trangu Rinpoche has said about the Mahamudra lineage supplication, because in it there are 4 points about the Mahamudra path. And the first point is about revulsion. So these are his words that include an expansion on the words of this section of the prayer. Quote, just as it is taught that this revulsion for cyclic existence is like the foot of meditation, do not be attached to any of the appearances of this life, such as the 8 worldly dharmas, food, wealth, any possessions, sweet talk, or words of fame. Rather, being like a child of the mountains, wearing the mist as your clothes and entrusting yourself to the plainest of foods, clothing, and speech, do not have even a hair's worth of interest in anything other than just the genuine Dharma. The ties to this life are thus completely severed, and you should engage in methods to turn the mind away from cyclic existence. End quote. Now, that's pretty severe. I don't recommend walking down the street using the mist as your clothing. That is just not going to work. However, if you start thinking about this and realizing that this is the direction you want to go in, that this is the direction that Milarepa went, you may never get there, but what can you let go of? There's lots of things that we can at least loosen our attachment to and derive great benefit from them. As he said here, attachment to the appearances of this life, the 8 worldly dharmas, to food, wealth, praise and blame, pleasure, pain, and so forth. We could at least lessen our attachment to these things. And as a result, this opens us up to spending less of our time thinking about these, trying to attain them, and more of focusing our minds on the Dharma. And this is trusting ourselves, trusting our Buddha nature. To go on, he talks a little bit in this teaching of his, again, about the 4 thoughts that turn one's minds to the Dharma. This is something to contemplate no matter what level you're at. So I won't go into that anymore. But to continue with this quote, grant your blessings so that this meditator whose attachments to cyclic existence is severed that way, which is like the foot of meditation, does not encounter any temporary adverse circumstances, such as demonic obstacles, being busy, fame, honor, and gain, and if they are encountered, does not crave for them. Through supplicating in this way, the verse of guidance on the common preliminaries is taught. Now, I have one more thing to say, and that is that when we did the Medicine Buddha this morning, we first started with a Tashi prayer. The Tashi prayer is an excellent prayer to do in the morning. It's an excellent prayer to do before you go to bed at night. And it's excellent to do anytime during the day. to go over this very briefly. The last 4 lines I will read in English. This is the aspiration of the Tashi prayer. With the work we have begun now, pacify all obstacles and harmful influences. May fulfillment of wishes, increase of glory, good fortune, prosperity, and happiness be met. May all be auspicious for us. So this helps remove obstacles to our practice. Rinpoche recommended doing this regularly. When we were in 3-year retreat, Rinpoche took a trip to Taiwan. He was gone for at least a month. He specifically asked us to do this prayer for him every day when we did our daily puja, which we did. When I have traveled with Lama Karma, as soon as we get in the car and start driving, we do the Tashi prayer, and so on and so forth. So I want to stress, and I'm bringing this up because here in this last teaching of Trungpa Rinpoche about the foot of meditation, that we don't have obstacles to our practice. And so this Tashi prayer is a very good and a simple prayer to do. There's no visualization involved. I noticed on my YouTube channel that I have an extensive teaching on the Tashi prayer if you want to learn more about it. So doing the Tashi prayer is very good to help remove obstacles. Now, the 8 worldly dharmas, just to review this, are praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and obscurity, pleasure and pain. Sometimes obscurity, they will use infamy, that we want to be well thought of. We don't want to be thought of poorly. Although some people, they are so confused that they think being thought of poorly is better than being thought of well. It's good to be bad, so to speak. But anyway, it's these groups of opposites that keep people in samsara totally occupied. They want to be praised. All blame goes somewhere else. They want to gain whatever it is they want to gain. They want loss to be experienced by somebody else. They want to be famous in whatever way they think being famous is. And they want to avoid obscurity, being a nobody. I know it's very hard. Back from the veterans' home, stopped at a store, and there was a man that was begging. And, most people are just walking by him, and that's being a nobody. And that's got to be difficult. So renunciation, again, is letting go of these worldly dharmas, this what keeps us trapped in samsara. Finally, here is an interesting quote by Traleg Rinpoche, and this will finish up the teaching. And this is more about Mahamudra. And I'm not sure what to say about this, but I will say something anyway. Quote, renunciation is Buddhism is not about renouncing things. That is easy to do, but renouncing the revolting mind. End of quote. That we have to renounce this mind, that these others as revolting, disgusting, despicable. Quote, we have to do that. What that means is we can have proper relationships with people. We have to work with our environment. We have to live in this world. And we live in this world very successfully, be caring, a loving person, interacting with everything that surrounds us, will not be damaged by the samsaric mind, the mind that finds everything revolting, end quote. So it is being in samsara, but not finding it revolting, disgusting, stinking, and so forth. Because in Mahamudra, samsara and nirvana are inseparable. Now, this is from the Mahamudra level, and probably none of you are at this level, but I'm bringing this up to point out this is where the path leads. The question was about this last quote by Traleg Rinpoche about this disgusting samsaric mind that is judging everything as being disgusting, revolting, and so forth. How do you do that? It is one step at a time. It isn't that that's where you start. This is where you end up. You start at the foundation level, working with that level of renunciation, the 10 non-virtuous actions, and so forth. And then from there, you add the Mahayana motivation to benefit all beings and see yourself as equal to others. And then as you do Mahamudra practice, gradually you start seeing the difference between samsara and nirvana is not what you were projecting, but it has to be experienced. You can't just say, well, I've read this, I've heard this, so therefore it is. There is really no other way around this. All of this goes back to courage, having the courage to let go of our habitual patterns, our projections, our presumptions, and so forth. The question was that Gyalwant Karmapa is talking about burning up our laziness like it was in the fire of the end of time. And how do we do this? First of all, going back to contemplating these four ordinary thoughts that lead the mind to the Dharma, thinking really about how much do I control? How much value are these things that I'm accumulating or trying to accumulate? How much value are they at the time of death? Here is a poem I wrote in 1989 when another friend of mine died. He actually had helped me in the construction work of the Hay River Center building that I'm sitting in right now. And we had done a lot of work exchange and we were very good friends. So I wrote this poem, Questions After the Death of a Friend. Life is so precious, yet so easily lost. Friends are so precious, yet so easily lost. Health is so precious, yet so easily lost. Why squander such riches? Life is so uncertain, possibilities and probabilities. No guarantee of being alive tomorrow. What do we really control? Are you grieving for the loss that others have suffered? Are you grieving for the loss you have suffered? Are you grieving because you feel you could be next? When grieving, why not grieve clearly? The loss was in the past. If you are next, it is in the future. Why let happiness or unhappiness hinge on history or mystery? Savor the experience of living. Life is full of sorrows and joy. Allow yourself to experience both. Can you let them go? How you learn to both embrace life and be renounced, and also have this renunciation. I will say this, I can't brag about my ability that I get sucked into samsara too, but I try to get sucked into it less than I used to. I try to keep in mind I could die at any time. I try to take care of my health. I see a lot of medical people, but it's just realizing that you can't hold on so tightly. I've owned this property for 52 years, and I kind of joke about it, that this house is like a relationship. The house keeps telling me, honey, you need to spend more time with me. Honey, you need to spend more money on me. I'm cold. I need new windows. I floored her with new flooring. I gave her a new kitchen. And she must be a Buddhist because she keeps telling me that because of impermanence, maintenance is permanent. So it's just letting go and realizing this is the world that you live in, and don't get so caught up in it when things go badly. The question is, how do you work with pain and basically keeping a positive attitude? The one thing is to not focus on it, to try to let go of it, even if it's a little bit. I will be more mobile than I should when I'm experiencing pain, but when it comes to physical pain, I have a rule of thumb. And I just saw an orthopedic doctor last week because I broke my ankle. And she told me the same thing. And that is, if it's a sharp pain, don't go there. If it's a dull pain, be careful. So I have kind of followed that well, I shouldn't say my whole life, but after becoming an adult. As for keeping a positive attitude, I have found, because I have suffered depression, serious depression, debilitating depression, that depression sucks, that it's a bottomless pit, and that you can't enjoy anything in life. Whereas there is so much in life that we can enjoy, little things we can enjoy if we can let go of our habitual patterns. What I learned about depression was it was a created state, and that I had to keep recreating it by listening to depressing music, watching depressing movies, reading depressing books, talking with other people about depressing subjects, and constantly having this inner voice, this inner dialogue, talking about how bad I was and how bad the world was. And it's making friends with that, realizing this is what's going on, and developing the ability to let go of it and see what's really going on in the world.